Morning. Good morning. I think it's still morning for all of us who are dialing in. And welcome to today's focusing on, of course, the case for sorghum. This session is hosted by AgriLux Marketing, led by founder and CEO Jeanette Sutherland, and supported by the Food Agriculture and Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network, which we call FANPAN, as well as Lotive. My name is Vuyoluteke, and I'm a director and head of membership and stakeholder relations at the Shared Value Africa Initiative. And I'm very excited, proud, honored to be lending support to not just this dialogue today, but also being a partner of AgriLux and their initiative, which they are launching, called the Wild Feast. As we start today's program, we invite you all to say hello, check in, introduce yourselves in the chat box where you're connecting from, and let's see if we can make this a lively conversation on screen as in the chat box. Welcome also to all our speakers who have joined us, and really excited to get started today with what I hope is going to be the first of many dialogues addressing the various we would need to discuss as a net community operating across the continent. So in reflecting about today's session and thinking about, the topic and the importance of sorghum, myself being a person of Xhosa descent, coming from the Eastern Cape in South Africa, my immediate thoughts, went to Umombo tea, the traditional beer that we drank during traditional ceremonies, during family and stay. And over the years, I also got to be introduced to ding, which is, a traditional fermented porridge of the Batswana culture, also, quite delicious. And I thought that what I know is that being here today, I'm speaking to those who are very much more knowledgeable than I am, and who I have no doubt will agree to the fact that it is so much more than that. And it has transformed to so much more than that. And that's what brings us to this conversation today. Sorghum is one of those crops that were identified by the agricultural pillar of the Department of Science and Innovation's bioeconomy strategy, which recognized the need to invest in value chain analysis initiatives that can support food security and the development of the agricultural sector through import substitution and other measures. The study by the DSI 2021 really aligned sorghum production and value chain to the revitalization of South Africa's agricultural sector, which has the potential really to expand by 1 million hectares and create 1 million jobs by 2030. So the benefits are not only economical, we're talking about climate resilience, we're talking about health benefits, affordability, and lest we forget, of course, agritourism, right? It's a recognized key market driver, agritourism, for local, indigenous cuisine, where globally consumer trends have shifted towards higher demands in authentic experience. Agriculture, has a great power in reinforcing Africa's role as the world's food basket. So there is a wide range of benefits to the integration of sorghum when we talk about transforming African food systems, but to do so takes coordination, partnership, right, to drive the change that we ultimately will benefit from, both as businesses and societies across the continent. And for us at the Shared Value Africa Initiative, the motivation was clear to the reason for participating during today's dialogue, right? We as an organization advocate for all businesses and organizations of all types to profitably and sustainably address challenges that face society and the environment through a strategy that is driven by innovation. By creating shared value, an organization is able to not only innovate, but also gain competitive advantage. There's a clear case here for not only environmental and socio-economical sustainability, but also sustainability when we are exploring the sorghum product. It's an important part of affecting change and leading with purpose, particularly in Africa, is collaboration and partnership across borders and sectors. And this is where the greater impact we can create as a collective can truly be seen. This was the intention behind curating today's dialogue, and bringing together our esteemed speakers who will share their unique perspectives and expertise as we look to explore this food system transformation in South Africa and beyond, and highlighting sorghum at the center of this. So really, very excited to be a support to the convener of this, which is AgriLux Marketing, as I mentioned earlier, and really, pulling our speakers together, hearing their thoughts and the expertise, and hopefully for us, it's driving action out of today's conversation, and not just a conversation and leave it at that. What can we all learn, and what can we all take forward as a collective as we have more discourse and dialogues following this one throughout the year and years to come? So to get us started, we will have some opening remarks from a selection of speakers from within the AgriLux network, as mentioned earlier. And I think very proudly, the first speaker that we're going to have with opening remarks today is Dr. Chilidzi Madzivandila, who is the CEO of the Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network. I have to say it out in full every time I say it. Which you also call FANPAN, those in the know. Chilidzi also serves as a commissioner for agriculture on the South African President's National Planning Commission. So we're very excited to have Chilidzi here, setting the tone and getting us started and planting the seed, to use a pun, as we continue today's conversation. Over to you, Chilidzi.
Thank you so much, Program Director, for providing the preamble to our webinar, and also for the generous introductions. First, let me acknowledge the 4 convening partners, AgriLux Marketing, who we've been working very closely with for the last three or 4 years, Local Village Foods, Shared Value African Initiatives, and FANPAN, the organization which I represent, which is a Pan-African policy think tank, which is serving regional secretariat based in South Africa. Let me also acknowledge the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, and the University of Western Cape for partnering with us in convening this webinar. We really appreciate your support. Also, let me front load and then thank our keynote speakers and panelists, and for our delegates to attend our webinar. We really value your time. We know that there are other competing priorities out there, but today you chose to spend this hour and a half with us, and for that, we really thank you. To all participants who are here, I need to mention that as one of our valued principles, we underscore the fact that we do not want to leave anyone behind. And for that, and in coming up with the bold and transformative actions which we want to suggest here, we will value all your contributions, and please note that all voices are equal, so don't be shy to contribute. One of the instructions that I was given was that I need to provide setting the scene preamble. What we know is that a sustainable pathway to transforming global, continental, and national food systems is very important. And it is, and in this much needed transformation, we need to make sure that businesses are delivering in 3 things. The first one is profit, then people must be healthy, and also the fact that the planet must also remain healthy. Then this call for us to make sure that we congregate and we ensure that sorghum also is part of the solution. How then do we came to conceptualize this? What we know is that, and the concept note then underscored this fact, that the sorghum food product or crop is wholesome, is indigenous to Africa, is local, and it provides diverse nutrients. So that's why we are saying that this wild crop that we are promoting or we want to profile is what we need to do as Africans, because if we don't do it, there's no one who will do it for us. And then for us, in terms of the end game for convening this webinar, there are 2 important questions among others which we will need to answer. The first one is, what are the key issues faced when we are trying to profile this important crop in terms of making sure that there is a critical demand, and also that the supply side is attended to. What are the things that we have got to look into to make sure that we are solving contextual challenges that the producers and the consumers are faced with? But not also then to look into the challenges. What is most important for us is to make sure that we also suggest some transformative solutions to this challenge that we are faced with. And then there are other things that I need to mention in terms of contextualizing our discussion today, that the theme is about expanding the market for an indigenous African crop. So we are not only seeking to promote this, but we want to come up with actions that are bold to make sure that we transform the African food system. And this is also then necessitated by the fact that when we enter into year 2023, we know that there is the United Nations Year of Millet, and sorghum is part of this. The program director spoke about the DSI study that was conducted. But in addition to this study report, there are two documents that I need to bring to plenary here. The first one is the National Development Plan, Vision 2030. And chapter 6 of that then brings to the fore that we really need to have an inclusive rural economy. And agriculture and food system is an integral part of that. And sorghum, we wish that it should be part of that. The second one is the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan. And this talks about profiling commodities that have got the potential to transform our food system, but more so to make sure that when doing this, there is a social compact between government and private sector. How can we start to collaborate to work around these issues? So how is this work now relevant to Fanapan? Then we are in full support of this initiative because we are implementing two thematic areas as part of our 2016-2023 strategy. And then the first one is climate smart agriculture. Already we have heard that the crop that we are profiling here is climate smart. The second issue is that this crop that we are about to discuss is a nutrition sensitive crop. It means that it has got a potential to provide positive nutrition and health outcomes. So these are the benefits that we are hoping to achieve if this crop comes to the mainstream of agriculture and the transformation of the food system. In conclusion, Program Director, I am looking forward to the 3 transformative actions that we are going to take forward after this webinar that we are convening today. And thank you so much for allowing me to provide the setting the scene opening remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Chilidze. And I think that part about leaving no one behind, very important. And, you know, the engagement, right? And the input and feedback that we will all have as a result of today's conversation. Very excited to have that. Thank you, Dr. Chilidze from Fanapan, to say it properly. Next, I'm very excited to also bring up for the next set of opening remarks for a few minutes, Dr. Babagana Amadou, who is the country representative for Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. FAO leads international efforts to defeat hunger and improve nutrition and food security. And most recently, you know, providing smallholder farmers in Sudan with agricultural support to produce their own goods and reduce dependence on aid support. That's just one element of what they do, but would love to hear from Dr. Amadou on behalf of FAO.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Babagana Amadou.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the FAO representative here, newly arriving here in South Africa. I think first and foremost, I want to profusely express the appreciation of the organization, FAO, to the organizers of this event for the invitation extended to us to take part in this very important dialogue. I recognize the presence of the senior government officials and other participants. Just to say that we're very happy to be part of this process. Sorghum millet, I think it's something that is very popular in Africa. It has a very long history in terms of consumption in terms of tolerant to the prevailing situations in many parts of Africa, especially the Sahel, in terms of, you know, being the staple food for many countries, especially in Sahelian Africa. So FAO is very highly committed in promoting the production, the processing and marketing of this product. We have observed, however, that in terms of trade in this very important crop, there are some areas of concern when you look at the figures of imports of this, you know, sorghum millet into Africa from other continents, despite the fact that we have got land, we have got a suitable environment, and the consumption is very high. It's a very popular crop, but we still in Africa import a significant amount of this. So this is an area of real concern to many of us, and we are fully prepared as far to sensitize and create awareness and advocate for positioning ourselves towards self-sufficiency in this important crop. I know we have issues with the availability of good quality seeds, for example. Access to good quality seeds is an issue in many parts of Africa. We also have the challenge of the impact of climate variability. This crop has got a reputation for being highly adaptable, but in recent years, we have seen signs of weakness in terms of adjusting to the climate variability. The rainfalls now in many parts of the continent, they come late and they are unevenly distributed and so on. So the tolerance level of the seeds are becoming more and more a challenge. There are evidences in many parts of the continent to show that they're becoming late maturing in some places, and somehow their performance is been adversely challenged by climate variability in many parts of Africa. So this is a real concern to many of us. This is an area where we think we have to do something pretty quickly, and that's where innovation comes in, that's where research comes in, that's where the issue of smart agriculture comes in. We really see a lot of opportunities for advocacy, especially in research, investment into research, to ensure that the tolerant level of this very highly consumed crop, it's maintained. I think FAO has recognized that and is doing a lot of work now, sensitizing many of our research institutions across the continent to pay attention to this impact of climate variability on this very important crop, very important commodity that has a huge potential in addressing the food insecurity. The numbers, the dynamics, food insecurity across the continent, it's worsening over the years. And this is a source of great worry to many of us. Sorghum millet is one of the very good candidates that we can target for solving our food insecurity issues. So as far, we are very happy to be part of this initiative to support, especially the convening of the International Year of the Millet later in the course of 2023. We are fully committed to partner with all stakeholders in ensuring that a successful commemoration of this event. It's taken place not only at the global level, but at the regional and the country levels across the continent. We're fully committed here in South Africa. We look forward to working with the authorities in ensuring that the messages are disseminated and all stakeholders are fully sensitized and fully aware of the dangers, especially facing this crop in terms of climate variability. I want to stop here. Thank you very much once again for giving us the opportunity to participate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amadou. And I think also even highlighting, yes, the potential of, the millet itself, but also the importance of understanding any potential, I want to say, shortcomings or, or areas that we need to research and consider a little bit more as we go forward as a network and as a community. So we appreciate your input and helping us keep those points in mind as well. Next up, I'd like to bring forward, Dr. Jemina Moeng, who is the Chief Director of Food Security at the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. In this role, Dr. Moeng oversees support to the smallholder sector, subsistence households, as well as in terms of infrastructure service to producers. Dr. Moeng, if you would mind joining us on the screen and saying a few words to really wrap up this part of the program for us in terms of opening remarks and saying some thoughts. Over to you, Dr. Moeng.
Thank you very much. Actually, good morning to everyone on the platform. I had actually connected both on my laptop and my phone purposely because I wanted to quickly share a very brief presentation that was going to put forward the pointers that I wanted to share with the platform. But in the interest of time, and I noticed that it looks like I'm disconnected from my laptop, which was having a challenge with the sound. I will then quickly just talk as without the presentation that I had prepared, that following on firstly, let me thank the invite and appreciate it from Fan Pan. Thanks to the CEO and the team there for involving us in such a critical topic. And the two speakers have addressed the issues. I will also just want to talk on a different angle from the two speakers and indicate that as the department, we have also conducted a survey, the survey that wants to identify where the areas of vulnerability are around food and nutrition security. And we are also doing this in the interest of determining the targeted and the targeting of interventions that government would like to put through. And such a platform wherein we are finding ourselves now will actually assist in terms of guiding these government interventions. So the aspect of this survey, which we have conducted recently, and we are finalizing on the report of the National Food and Nutrition Security Survey, you will also note that we are emphasizing both the food and the nutrition aspect of its nature, is actually starting to indicate that we have, as a continent in Africa, a high percentage of cereals consumption, and we are very low on eating protein. And to that effect, you find that the bulk of our young people and the babies, especially less than 6 months, between 0 months and 5 years, are heavily stunted. And we also face a challenge that our youth that is between 18 years and 29 years are facing the same challenge of having severe stunting. The same goes for wasting. The youth is mostly severely stunted, especially the age between 18 and 29 years. we are facing a challenge there, as well as the ages that are 42 and 53. These are people that have a severe sign of malnutrition in terms of their body frame, where they are smaller than their height. And this is a challenge because that goes to your brain. The stunting and the wasting, the results thereof are visible and very clear on the person's performance at the levels of both schooling and at the starting of work. Now, there's a challenge further that shows that the females are more severely stunted, and more wasting again happens on females. Now, this brings us to the issue of saying, what is it that we should be doing as a country and as a nation? We should actually follow through these indigenous crops, such as the sorghum. Why sorghum? It's because it's a source of vitamins and minerals. It has a high drought tolerance level, rich in antioxidants. We find ourselves as a nation at the same time where we're having wasting and stunting, also obese, because we're not eating nutritious food. We're wanting to eat a lot of bulky, fulfilling food. And again, this sorghum assists in curbing the aspects of these with health diseases such as diabetes, high blood cholesterol, weak bones, and including some of the diseases that we hate most, such as these tumor growths. And actually, women that are breastfeeding, even when I was a mother of my children that are older now, we were encouraged to eat mabele. We call it mabele in the African context, because it indicated that it provides us with the necessary nutrition without making you grow in terms of your weight. And I'm sure most ladies and young people and women will attest to this, that no one wants to eat and then they gain weight thereafter. So this becomes a practical aspect of why we should really go back to the issues of popularizing sorghum as one of our grains. The question becomes, why then are we not growing it in large quantities as a country? The response to that is that South Africa, as it is a net importer of sorghum, with more than 50% of its consumption originating mainly from Botswana and a smaller portion from Ukraine. Now you will note that we have a challenge on the conflict between the Ukraine and Russia. It means now we're having a more serious challenge in terms of this grain crop. Again, why we are not growing it further is that there is increased imports of sorghum at a competitive price from the US especially. You will want to earn your income in dollars. And this now has resulted in local farmers selling it at import parity prices, and further exacerbating the margin and the squeeze on the processors. Therefore, as I conclude, we would want to be part of a discussion such as this one, which wants to look forward to healthy eating, healthy diets, food security, not compromising the nutrition aspect thereof. And I would like to end in terms of that, having the note that we have also launched the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan, launched by the Minister in May 2022, which actually then wants to address the linkages throughout of all the work that we are doing with food systems, as far as the recognition of the power of collective action, which includes the call on our partners. And welcome to the FAO new rep. We work very closely with the FAO country office in South Africa. As the department, we always tap on your knowledge, tap on your assistance to actually push through initiatives such as these ones that are targeting a certain category of communities in our sphere of operation. But thank you very much, FunPan, for such an initiative. We are looking forward to become part of the results thereof and the actual implementation and realization of the intent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moeng. Also, just adding to those, I want to say, scene-setting remarks by our three speakers. And just to note for everyone as well that Dr. Moeng will stay with us and will also be, saying a few words as a closing remarks at the end of the program. So please do, stick with us for that, providing some thoughts on the discussions that we will be having and, possibilities of next steps from the department to ensure that the issue of increasing market access for sorghum becomes a reality for South African producers. And I think, Dr. Moeng, perhaps part of those comments, if you've got any thoughts around, the challenges some have faced with regards to the taxing of sorghum and, which really affects that possibility of, I want to say, producing it locally as well. Any thoughts that you might have from the government perspectives would be appreciated. So with that, I would like to move forward. I'm keeping an eye on the time because we've got a lot of content to go through today and very excited to bring up our next speaker, which is our keynote speaker, Professor Julian May, who is a director of the DSI National Research Foundation, the Center of Excellence in Food Security. Prof. May is also director of the Institute of Social Development at the University of the Western Cape and holds the UNESCO Chair in African Food Systems. His current research focuses on food security, childhood deprivation, as well as malnutrition. And I think in his remarks, Prof. May will just really provide a very brief response to the findings and recommendations of the study to establish market opportunities for sorghum in South Africa of 2021. Prof. May, I did see you here with us, so welcome and please join us and thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me share my screen. I hope everyone can see it now.
Yes, we can see it.
Let me just move this so that I can start the slideshow. And we should be in the slideshow now.
Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this important event. I really appreciate it because it gives us an opportunity to present the findings of research that we've been conducting for about the last 7 years on the subject of sorghum, but also other crops similar to sorghum. So I'm not a great believer in detective stories where I reveal the answer at the end of the last chapter. I'd rather tell you the answer right up front. Are there market opportunities for sorghum in South Africa? Definitely. And I base that on research that myself and my colleagues, I think who may be in this room, Nishad Emma-Bucks at the University of Pretoria and Ndiko Ledidi at the University of Western Cape have been conducting. This research is largely drawn from the fields of plant science, so understanding more about the plants of the plant sorghum, but also from food science, so how we might think about processing that plant in ways which are more nourishing, which are more palatable, and are also more suitable for the current times. Very quickly about the Center of Excellence. We are funded by the DSI and by the NRF. It's one of 16 centers of excellence that are established in South Africa. It's the only one that focuses on issues of food and nutrition. Centers of excellence are hosted at a university rather than owned by a university. So they're seen as multi-institutional, multidisciplinary. We operate as a virtual research center and always have done. We focus on capacity building. So in addition to doing research, much of our focus is on the training of postgraduate students. And we have a particular goal in mind, which is nutrition security with dignity. So not simply making sure that people have enough food, but also being aware of what they have, what choices they have available to when buying that food, and on what circumstances do they actually consume that food. Currently, there are about 28 institutions involved in the COE, 100 researchers, right at the moment 130 students, and over the last 8 years, we've generated around 350 million Rand in research income. Okay, so Dr. Moeng has already alluded to what we refer to as the triple burden of malnutrition, where we have energy malnutrition, represented through the stunting, the prevalence of stunting that she described. My statistics are a little older than hers. It's around 22% of stunting of under 5s. Diet-related non-communicable disease, particularly diabetes, and many of those linked to the prevalence of overweight and obesity. And finally, micronutrient deficiencies. We're also interested in SMART, but we talk about SMART being smart foods that are safe, that are marketable, that are affordable, that are ready to eat, and critically, that are tasty. And then obviously we're concerned about the environmental sustainability of the ways in which we produce that food, which is also the waste and also what the inputs that go into the production of food. Now, the concerns about undernutrition have already been mentioned, and it's an alarming picture in South Africa at the moment. We've had a steady increase of having made progress. We've had a steady increase in the prevalence of undernutrition, not getting in the right mix of nutrients and the right quantity of nutrients, and a spike following COVID. So we're pretty sure that COVID saw both an increase in undernutrition during the time of the pandemic, but also subsequently as we're managing now the effects of the lockdowns, of the job losses, and other issues that came out of COVID. We have a reverse picture when we look at sorghum production and consumption. Again, it's already been mentioned. We see a decline both in the production of sorghum in South Africa as well as its consumption. And we need to be thinking about why is that taking place? And Dr. Moeng has already mentioned some of the reasons why we see a decline in production, and what are the barriers to the consumption of sorghum as a food, something which many people remember fondly from their childhood, but now is not being consumed in the same levels as it used to be. Now, we're interested not only in sorghum. We believe that Africans' indigenous crops are essentially neglected nutrition powerhouses. The consumption of rice, maize, wheat, soybean, and sunflower are the most widely consumed foodstuffs in South Africa and the world's most consumed crops. They have significant advantages. They are calorie, macronutrient, and micronutrient sources of food, but none of them are indigenous to Africa, and yet there are better indigenous crops with similar or even better nutritional profiles as these crops. So it means that they become neglected, underrepresented in South African diets, and I suspect mostly unknown to many young South Africans. Now, something which we've raised as a research topic in the papers that we've written is, are we not looking sometimes at a false binary when we think, is it maize consumption or sorghum consumption? Actually, it can be both maize and sorghum. We can make products which combine the two foods, and we can also think about maize plus an infinity of similar indigenous crops, such as the legumes and other grains that we grow in Africa, that again can enhance both the nutritional value, the taste, and also the cultural value of the crops that we are producing. So we have a range of things that we can do where we can bring together sorghum and maize to be able to produce better foods. And we can think about the breakfast cereals that we can try and enhance, how we can improve the components in samp and beans, as well as the dishes that have already been mentioned. And critically there, the question is to the extent to which we can start thinking about modifying sorghum in a way in terms of how we process it so that we can also use sorghum in bread making. Now, nutritional benefits have already been mentioned, and they are well described in the report. Sorghum contains higher protein than maize, but we do have to deal with the fact that it has a lower protein quality. Depending on the product, there's an issue that starch can be trapped when we cook sorghum, and as a result, this means that it can have lower digestibility. This is particularly a problem when we're thinking about providing sorghum to children who would have to deal with issues of the viscosity of the product and whether they can in fact eat sufficient quantities of it. Sorghum has an issue of tannin, which we need to be thinking about. These can affect taste, but also tannins have many health benefits that we need to be trying to think about how we can capture. And finally, there are questions of how sorghum can be a gluten-free alternative But again, there we have to deal with problems of its functionality, of how we manage the glue, how we manage sorghum when we're trying to process it. Overall, our research, and when I talk about our research, I will share in the chat at the end of the conversation the more than 20 papers that we produced, scientific peer-reviewed papers that we produced on this topic, has shown that there is more reason to include sorghum in diets than not. It is overall has good levels of a whole range of nutrients that we've been able to identify that are of benefit to the human diet. And you'll see there one of our PhD students recently graduated who's been working on this on these topics. But now there's another issue why we should be concerned about trying to improve our production and use of the plant sorghum. Our colleague from the FAO has already mentioned the importance of climate change and how this is going to negatively impact upon food security. The scenario for Africa is worrisome, and you can see here the likely conditions of drought and dryness across the continent, and how we see how that is going to negatively impact upon South Africa. Our expectations of climate change have been brought forward. Things that we thought were going to happen in 30 years' time are happening right now. And even our National Development Plan that Commissioner Shalidzi mentioned earlier is again out of date in terms of recognizing the importance of climate change and how we're going to respond to it. Our research has shown that sorghum has better climate change resilience than maize. And one of the things that we're now trying to understand is what it is about the sorghum plant that leads it to have that climate change resilience, that allows it to deal with drought, with salinity, and with heat better than some of the other food crops that we currently rely on. This is both because we think this could be a food that we could grow as climate change has a greater impact, but also in learning from the plant, allowing the plant to be our teacher, we may be able to understand how we can also develop our standard food crops to be able also to have the same attributes, the same positive characteristics as sorghum. And again, you'll see one of the papers there where we've been able to identify what are the components of sorghum which allow it to be more climate change resilient than maize. We can also go further to start understanding what are the resilient components and the crop genetics of the plants that we've been working with to be able to build climate change resilience in other plants. And again, you'll see some of the ways in which we've tried to do this using Omnix technologies. So all of these cutting edge technologies that we've been able to apply to understand better how to work with the plant sorghum. Now, what I think is quite unique about some of the work that we've been doing is trying to break out of disciplines and recognize understanding how to improve the production of the plant is only one of the things that we need to be doing. We also need to be able to think how we improve its processing and ultimately its value to the consumer. So here we've been trying to look at some of the issues that deal with the viscosity of foods that are prepared using plants such as sorghum. And this is to deal with the fact that sorghum, when it's fed to children, may in fact be too dense for the child to be able to swallow enough and to store it in the very small stomach of a young child. So here we're trying to look at things such as bringing together cereals with legumes that may be able to deal with that problem, using extrusion processes to be able to reduce the viscosity of the sorghum product. And again, you'll see on the right there a series of the technologies that we've been trying to apply to sorghum and indeed to other similar crops to be able to make them more palatable to a consumer. There are many products that we've been able to explore, and these would be alternatives to some of the traditional ways in which we consume sorghum in the past. The production of rice. We've been dealing with the problem of a long cooking time and how we can and how to address that. Again, using microwave and infrared technologies, we have found ways in which we can reduce the cooking time and also show better sensory properties so that the sorghum rice feels more similar to the rice. And again, to remember, rice has become a very important consumer item in South Africa, and our rice is almost entirely imported. So here we have an option also to be able to develop livelihoods and also substitute one type of food for a locally grown food for something that currently we're importing. We're able to make sorghum snacks. And again, we've been trying to deal with issues of dealing with the central quality of sorghum and how to make that a more attractive and smart food for the consumer. We've looked at the digestibility of the starch that sorghum carries, and we've again been exploring and researching methodologies which allow that starch to become more digestible. We've developed sorghum pasta, so again, thinking about other ways in which we can produce a product, again, which we've been able to test and find that it is a product which is attractive to consumers. We've looked to knowledge from other parts of the continent. Kishra is a food that is made in countries such as Sudan, and here again we've noticed that sorghum can be used for kishra. It has been used for kishra in other countries, and how we can use the technologies that are used in the production of kishra to be able to produce foods that might be more palatable to South Africans. So again, we can draw on the indigenous knowledge of other countries on the continent. And then finally, stepping away from food for the moment, sorghum products can also be used for biopackaging, which can be used for non-food usages, and thereby dealing with some of the issues of waste and pollution that we have in South Africa. I'll end here by just drawing attention, although at your request, I've focused on sorghum and the response to the report. Sorghum is but one of a series of resources that we have available in South Africa and elsewhere in Africa that we think are resources for resilience. They are ways of making our agricultural sector more resilient and our food system operate in a better way. These are the projects that we are actually working on at the moment. I've talked about sorghum at some length. Another crop which we're now starting to explore in more detail is bambara, which is a bambara groundnut. And we're also moving towards some of the millets and some of the other crops that we are able to use. So these are plants that we feel better understanding would allow us to have a better food system. To end then on constraints, well, the one is the attitudes of consumers, of policymakers, and the scientific community to the product of sorghum. I was quite struck, but in preparing for this talk, I went through the papers that have been published that we've written on sorghum. And I was surprised to see only one of those papers has been cited by more than 50 researchers. Typically, our center gets about 40 to 50 citations for every paper that we produce. And I wondered, do we also have a concern that the scientific community itself, people like me, have not been sufficiently interested in crops like sorghum, and more work needs to be done to show how these crops are valuable, and we need to be citing the research that's being done. VAT has been mentioned, and I think that's a low-hanging fruit that would be able to reduce the price of the food to the consumer. We need to manage its lower protein quality. We believe that is a solvable problem. We need to do more research into the benefits, and these are both benefits to the soil as well as to human health, as well as to the economy. We need to be thinking about how to develop more convenience foods, because these are limited when we compare what is available in terms of maize and of wheat. The spookies that many children eat are produced from corn rather than a crop such as sorghum. Our center has not yet worked very carefully on how we build the business model. And this is here where I think we need to be thinking about involving the Department of Agriculture, the Agricultural Research Council, and the private sector to think, what is the business model that is going to incentivize farmers, as well as processors, as well as shops to be able to stock this crop. And finally, with sorghum, but also the other crops that I've mentioned, and ones which I have not yet mentioned, we need to be thinking about how do we manage the sustainable exploitation of such crops. We can't simply pillage the resources that we've got available without further degrading our natural resources. So part of what we need to be doing is the sustainable management of their exploitation. I'll stop there, Chair. I hope I've kept time, and I will end my presentation. And let me see, I want to do one more thing. Mm-hmm. And I will put into the chat the publication so the colleagues attending this meeting can source them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. If you may stay on screen with me for just one more question. I want to also acknowledge the specificity of the constraints that you listed towards the end, especially the part about the potential to collaborate with the private sector, but also other sectors as well, especially government. So I think, you're giving us a lot to not only think about for today's conversation, but as we carry on with the work that we do. You also mentioned the papers that you'll be sharing, which is quite a vast number of work that has been happening. Would you maybe have specific areas or gaps that you think you could research further into within all the work that's been done to date? Or would you just, is it as big a problem as what we might fear it is? If there's specific gap areas that you might identify within the research.
My sense is we are now trying to identify how we can understand the attributes, the qualities of a plant, of sorghum, and how we can try and see whether those qualities can be transferred to other plants. Because although we may be very keen on promoting this product, there are limitations, and particularly when it comes to baking, when it comes to baking, which we need to address. And that means then thinking about how we learn from the plant rather than exploit it directly. I don't think we've gone far enough in understanding the business model. And I think that, as I mentioned in the conclusion, so how to make sorghum a profitable option for the farmer, and how to make sorghum a generator of jobs. Critical to South Africa is about the promotion of livelihoods, and we need to think how this crop and the foods that can be made from it can also generate jobs in the best way possible. And again, I see that as that's work that still needs to be done. The nutritional value, I think we've established the feasibility, the technical solutions to some of the problems that were talked about in the past. I think we resolved those, and we can move forward on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Appreciate that. And thank you for joining us. I just want to highlight for everyone as always here with us, if you've got any questions, please do type them in the Q&A. If it's specific to Prof. Tabile, please type in the Q&A and ask Prof to maybe answer in the chat box. Otherwise, we will have a Q&A section in the last 10 minutes of today's program. We are a little bit behind in terms of time, so if you can just bear with us, everyone, we'll definitely allocate time for that conversation. Thank you so much, Prof, for that. So up next is going to be our panel discussion. And I want to invite, as I mentioned now, we've got a Q&A that we'll be addressing or using shortly for the questions. But I want to invite I want to use the word dynamic speakers, to join me on stage. I will introduce each of them and then we switch on the cameras, and then we can follow on with the conversation from there. First, we have Chef Mokgadi Tsweng, who is a plant-based chef and indigenous food activist. She has a passion and expertise that lie in reintroducing our plates, with a modern fusion indigenous foods that are good for the earth and for our health. So I think that theme has been coming up a lot today, as we had in our speakers previously. She is the author of the widely acclaimed plant-based cookbook, Vegelicious, and she's on a mission to preserve and mainstream the rich and nutritious heritage of indigenous South African foods. Hi, Chef Tsweng. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to just introduce everyone and then I'll address the questions. Thank you. We also have with us Pires Tole, who's the CEO of the African Marmalade Farm. Her career spans working in private sector corporations, communications, marketing, PR, and so forth. But really what inspired her was when during her travels, she identified a gap in the market for authentic African food. And she really not only founded African Marmalade Farm to produce, but she also sources from other farms a range of organically grown indigenous African vegetables and grains, really aiming to mainstream, indigenous crops into knowledge, as well as our understanding, right, or our own menus of them. We also have with us Pamandla Manqele, who's a co-founder and commercial director of Local Village Foods. She is inspired by the African continent, I love that, and its diverse cultures and its quest for social and economic unity. And Pamandla really wants to play a role in implementation of free and fair trade across Africa. We have as well with us on our panel today, Mpho Chukudu, who is a registered integrative and functional nutritional dietitian. In her practice, she uses food and its nutritional compounds, as well as stress management, sleep, and exercise to really promote optimal health for all. And nothing excites Mpho more than blending nutritional compounds and cultural memories. She also co-authored a book called Eat Ding, which offers healthy and dietary solutions using indigenous foods and methods with a modern twist. And then we have finally on our panel, Letu Chabangu, who is a co-founder of Ukamba Beer Works. Yes, we went across the range when it came to the value chain today. His dream is to make a craft beer that resonates with African culture and heritage. And that's what he does, right? He also pursues new knowledge through research and collaboration. For example, he's got a partnership with the University of Limpopo that facilitates knowledge transfer to students to ensure that the next generation learns technical skills in brewing craft beer using sorghum, right? While also valuing African culture and heritage. So, you know, seeing that, you know, across the value chain, our speakers will bring in their perspectives. And within this conversation, we really wanted to highlight, you know, 5 specific areas, and we're going to address these through practical questions that within the context of South Africa's food system transformation agenda, what their experiences are and what their thoughts are, and a little bit of forward thinking as to what could be possible. You know, so this discussion then will focus on the relevance of food, of indigenous systems and food crops, particularly sorghum, to the food system transformation agenda, as we heard earlier from our various speakers, the importance, the potential, and there are some gaps or some, let's say, limitations that are already being experienced within this area, right? Whether there is in fact demand at scale, is a supply at scale, and really diving a little bit into key issues that are faced in aligning demand and supply markets for sorghum and sorghum-based products. And then we're going to end off our chat at the end and really looking at what could be done and what should be done to unblock barriers in ensuring sustainable demand and supply markets for sorghum and other indigenous food crops to really contribute to South Africa's food system objectives. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with Paul, who is our dietitian expert on this panel. Paul, just, you know, to hear your thoughts as we start the panel, indigenous crops and food systems in general, right, but specifically sorghum, all are relevant to the food system transformation agenda, as I've been saying, right? Can you share your thoughts on this, particularly from the perspective of how food is produced, accessed, and consumed? People are getting sick. You know, we've had the stats from, you know, the department as well as a prof when it comes to dietary malnutrition and I want to say deficiencies that can happen, and people are also getting sick with non-communicable diseases, especially here in South Africa. Talk to us from your perspective how all of this connects and what you know, your perspective is on responding or intervening as a dietitian.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm unable to start my video. It says the host has stopped it.
Let's see if our team can sort you out for there we go. We can see.
Yes, there you go. Thank you so much. Okay, I think indigenous crops are important for the transformation of this food system, especially when we're looking at issues of food security in South Africa. If we're looking specifically at sorghum, sorghum is a low GI grain that is very high in fiber, it's high in vitamins and minerals. And it's also high in polyphenols, which are concentrated in the bran fraction of the grain. And these polyphenols have been shown to have several potential health benefits. That includes being anti-diabetic, it's cholesterol lowering, it's also anti-inflammatory, and also has anti-cancer properties. So it makes sense for the consumption of sorghum as a whole grain than when it's sifted and the fiber is not included in the plate. And indigenous and naturalized crops are actually easier to grow, and they're also full of beneficial nutrients that can be used to fill the nutrient gaps, especially in poor households. They offer nutrients, they offer variety, and also they are important for climate change. And there are some studies that actually claim that sorghum has more polyphenols than the blueberries, which we tend to consume more in South Africa, especially the middle class. And they are not actually indigenous to the country. And knowing that South Africa is actually a water scarce country, they use a lot of water to be planted. Like other African grains like millet, folio, and teff. Sorghum is gluten-free. So actually, when the world looks for gluten-free grains, they do look to Africa. But sadly, we don't appreciate these beautiful crops that we have been given. In traditional methods, sorghum is usually consumed when it's whole, and you find that it's mixed with legumes like bambara nuts and cowpeas and different types of lentils to make a complete meal. It's also fermented to make porridge, which we call ding in Setswana, and it gives a satisfying yet subtle taste, and it's also used to make beer. And we know that with fermenting grains and also other foods, the nutrients become more available, and it's easy to digest. That you find that in many communities, fermented porridge is used as a winning food. So it is essential that we keep on educating people more and more and actually taking them back from where they come from. I know that as a whole grain, it takes longer to cook. People don't have time. And we also have power issues in South Africa. So when you soak it, you actually reduce the cooking time. And also to note, also as part of the education, that sorghum and millets do contain phytates and tannins, which are falsely termed as anti-nutrients because they do reduce the bioavailability of important nutrients such as calcium, zinc, and iron. But the truth is these anti-nutrients are actually phytonutrients that are important for general health. And since our grandmothers knew best, they used traditional processing methods such as fermenting and soaking and sprouting to significantly reduce the anti-nutrients, therefore increasing the bioavailability of these important nutrients. But it's also to note that innovation is very important if we want to increase the importance of, if we want to increase the consumption of indigenous crops such as sorghum. So important that we look at making flapjacks, using sorghum, like puffing sorghum to be used as a cereal, for like a breakfast cereal, or also as a snack. It does actually make beautiful bread when it's fermented. It can be used to make biscuits and muffins and also pasta. And sorghum, like other speakers have mentioned, it is planet friendly because it is drought resistant. Like South Africa doesn't have a lot of water. And it's said that even in this country where we have beautiful crops that we can use to improve the nutritional status and also the economy of many people, we do rely on 3 crops such as maize, wheat, and soya out of the potential 6,000 to 7,000 crops. And we using them mainly as monoculture. We're losing biodiversity and the soil and water qualities, and we are also polluting the environments with the pesticides that we use. And sadly, in South Africa, sorghum is not commonly eaten as a staple food, like also in neighboring in neighboring countries. It has been overtaken by maize and wheat, which are indigenous and are mainly consumed without the fiber, which is essential for gut and overall health. The other problem is with transforming the whole food system is that the food industry is not showing much interest in indigenous crops. Like, they sort of sanitizing our taste buds to become more Western and, a more Western diet, and we are surely losing our taste preference. So you walk into a store in South Africa, you actually feel like a foreigner, because if you come from a rural areas, you don't see the food that you grew up with, and you feel like you are lost. And we tend to then go on to forget who we are and our taste preference. So by moving away from our culture and moving away from the foods that we grew up with, that our body is accustomed to, we then increase our susceptibility to obesity and non-communicable disease. And also in the health programs, like you find in a lot of hospitals, actually almost all hospitals in South Africa, they don't offer sorghum as part of the hospital diets. It's not commonly found. You actually have to go down to the taxi rank to go find sorghum or some, other not so clean areas to access your health. It's like in trying to be healthy, we're asking people to choose between health and culture, and it's actually not fair for anybody else. And lastly, to conclude, with my clients, the issue with sorghum also is that it's more expensive than maize meal. In South Africa, maize and also wheat in a form of brown bread are exempt from VAT, but sorghum is not, and sorghum is more nutritious. So it's one of those issues that the government looks to look at in trying to improve the health of South Africa. And actually, to celebrate this year, the FAO declared 2023 as the year of millets, and actually sorghum is included. So we're trying to actually make people more aware of the grain and trying to get them to eat it more, because you find beautiful recipes and new products like pastas and crackers and breads in foreign countries, and those countries have overtaken us in planting sorghum and in consuming sorghum, whereas sorghum comes from this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mpho. You've just given me so much when you spoke about how people might perceive it as a matter of choosing between health and culture. That's such an important comment, because speaking of sanitized pallets and when in fact our grandmothers knew best, that's certainly something that I'm gonna keep in mind. And I wanted to invite you as well, if maybe share as well in the chat with our attendees, where people can also, those who want to take a look at your book, buy your book, if you've got a link that you can share with us on that, I think would be great, because I certainly am keen to see each thing and get some recipes out of that for my own health benefits. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to also invite Chef Itsweng, and just to hear from you, because as we're talking here about the fact that there's perception, not issues, challenges that when it comes to sorghum, perceptions are that it might be a signifier of poverty, that it has not transformed with the times. Earlier I made reference to my own childhood memories of traditional ceremonies when I go back home to the Eastern Cape, etc. So from your perspective, is there a mind shift that we're seeing or that we're driving in conversations and on platforms such as this one? Are we closer to seeing this happen, and perceptions changing, or from your in your activism, food activism, I want to say, what has been the response from the consumer side, but also the commercial side of it?
Well, thank you for having me on the panel. I'm really looking forward to hearing what the other panelists have to say, and hearing from Professor May was really, really enlightening, but also it was almost like reassurance that sorghum is going to be back on our plates, whether we like it or not, because there is a need for it, but also just in terms of our health, as Mpho has alluded to, but also in terms of our culture. We need to reclaim sorghum on our plates because it's ours, And what I'm seeing in the food industry, especially because I'm one of the judges for the Eat Out Restaurant Awards, and what we saw last year was a lot of chefs in fine dining establishments bringing in sorghum as part of their plate offerings. So for me, that shows me that a shift is happening, a movement has started, where we as South African chefs, we have something special on our plates that we can show to the world. And we're coming on strong. People are learning more about sorghum and putting it on their plate in all sorts of ways. So the processing of it has begun. Chefs are in their kitchens, creating all sorts of amazing things and amazing stories around sorghum, which is critical for us because, as you know, chefs play a very important role in the food system in that they stand between the farmers and food producers and consumers. So we're the people that create the vibe. We make sure that people eat what we say they must eat. You can see that with what happened with quinoa. In 2013, the FAO named 2013 as the year of the quinoa, and sales of quinoa it boomed, everybody started knowing what quinoa was, all because the chefs were putting it on their plates, teaching people about this amazing grain and its health benefits. Sorghum is in the same position right now. And it's the beginning, for me, what I'm seeing is the beginning of a revolution or a reclaiming of sorghum on our plates as South Africans. As we know, it grows here, it's our indigenous crop, but we also have stories. We understand, and we connect to the grain in a very spiritual way. It's ours, and we use it obviously when we, in our rituals, but more importantly as a health, as for our health. So it's amazing to see that not only is it good for us, but also for planetary health, which is important. And what's happening now is that a lot of chefs are learning about this crop. So the first thing first, you need to understand where the crops come from. So you're able, as a chef, you're able to tell the story of the crop and the story of the farmer, and teach about its health benefits. So for us, what I'm seeing in people's kitchens, in my community, in my chefing community, is a lot of education is going on. A lot of workshops are being held around indigenous crops and how we as chefs can put them back onto our plates. And that's the way to create a market and demand, because it doesn't matter if we, if farmers farm the crop, but nobody is asking for it and there's no demand for it. And demand only comes when people understand how to use the crop, how to use it on a daily basis, because it's one thing for us chefs in our high, restaurants, in our restaurants creating these amazing dishes. But if people can't use it at home on the daily, then again, the demand won't be as much. So it's important for us also as chefs to show regular people, everyday moms, everyday people who actually who can integrate this crop on their everyday plate. So I'm seeing the shift is happening with a lot of chefs. I'm seeing the world actually asking us, what do we do with this grain? So right now we are placed in a position where we can advocate for this crop in reclaiming it. And reclaiming it not only adds biodiversity to our plates as South Africans, but also add excitement, the new excitement, or actually reclaiming the old for new, understanding that also this crop is critical for our future as Africans, and our future in food security. So for us, we know all sorghum recipes. We're trying to now bring back those recipes to everyday life to teach people that before there was sorghum, before there was maize and beans, or samp and beans, there was sorghum and beans. So trying to bring back those recipes and understanding that those are simple recipes that can be used not only as by us as chefs or people at home, but also can be used in school feeding programs, bringing the simplicity and deliciousness of food to the people. And it's not just, sorghum must, only be had or enjoyed by people who in the wellness industry who understand its protein content, or who understand, its health benefits, and not having everybody access that health benefit. So it's important for us also as chefs, as teachers, to teach about the basics, how to use it, how to ferment it, and have it every day for porridge instead of, the regular pap that we're all obsessed with, and just easy ways to incorporate it on your everyday life.
Absolutely. I love when you said chefs set the vibe, right? You introduce us to the, to the ingredient, it becomes very trendy. But now in the year of the millet, as has been stated, it's a time for us to actually educate ourselves, right? Be part of the demand. So we integrate it and understand it and use it in our daily lives. I think that's very important. And I think, as I said to Mpho earlier, even with you as well, Chef, to also share details of your book, which launched to much acclaim recently, and, for those who want to access it as well. So thank you for that. I'm going to come back for closing remarks to all our speakers. So, please bear with us. And also a reminder that the Q&A boxes there, or chat boxes there, if you ask questions, and that we are recording the session live streaming right now on YouTube. But we'll also share the recording of the session afterwards. Thank you so much. So I want to then also move on to Siphamandla from Local Village Foods. And I think from your perspective, Siphamandla, especially from the perspective of retail, I was just, would love to hear from you in terms of the fact that, it goes without saying that if there are no markets and no demand, all of this is moot, right? What has been your experience? Is there indeed a legitimate market in demand and supply to show that this is a feasible business visible product to sell, and just share us a little bit about Local Village Foods experience in this perspective.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. I think for us as a business, we operate at a sort of a very small scale. So we're not a mainstream and mass, at least at this point, just because South Africa's market is very designed as an oligopoly. You see that in the banking sector and the insurance, even in terms of electricity supply, there's a few players and they have sort of margins. So you tend to be, as you come in as a new player, you tend to target a very niche market as you start up, and then you build your portfolio as you go. How we play, the space that we play in currently. So our sorghum, for example, is available through your Dis-Chem, our sorghum flour, and then the grain and the other products you would find at little organic health stores, beautiful stores like your Jackson's Real Food Market. And already, as you hear the name of the stores, those are not stores that every South African goes to and shops. So we find that indeed there's a market and there's an interest in the sorghum, but it's not the main market of South Africa. It's a very niche market. It's people who have income and means to be able to buy perhaps a raw commodity, or even has the time to cook that commodity, and is able to explore these types of recipes like your flapjacks and your risottos and your rice with your curry, instead of having sort of sorghum rice, for example, instead of having your typical rice. So you're seeing this sort of client, or rather this market that has access to these products, which is, as I was saying, not the main market. So there's definitely an opportunity, but I think also there's just an opportunity for us to make it more affordable, make it more accessible. But you have to get that by reducing your price points. So if my farmer supplier, for example, gives me at a very high price, and I put up my markup, or I value add and create something, and I then take it to a store, then puts up their markup, it becomes quite expensive and really not as accessible. So that's, for me, I think, and reality of business is that you have to have economies of scale, or you really have to have super rich people who buy this product on a daily basis. And I think as South African, we don't want to see a situation like that because of the health benefits of sorghum. We don't want it to be something that only fits a certain group of people, that we want it to be something that actually is eaten by the majority of the people. So to answer your question, definitely there is a market. But the question that perhaps we could be asking is, how do we then make it more accessible for the main market? I think that's really our experience. I think the other thing, this topic reminded me of the story of the potato. Potato was not this sexy French fries that we get to enjoy today. But a lot of people, when potatoes were introduced, really had a lot of suspicion, because remember, potatoes were from South America. They were not a European, Western cuisine. It was not a staple. So you've had to have a lot of intervention to bring the potato into mainstream. You found that I think one of the people in Europe, a sort of group of people who thought this thing has no smell, they have no taste, we're definitely not growing it, we don't see a potential to it. Until we saw Frederick the Great of Prussia actually commanding people, start growing this, issuing an order, and people didn't want to grow this. And then he did a reverse psychology around promoting potatoes, where he actually decided to deploy a field, his own field, to start growing this. And then he put guards around the potato, to protect this crop. And so all the peasants saw this and said, okay, if something is worth protecting, therefore it's worth stealing. And so they started snatching, and they planted in their own home gardens. And you sort of see, and that really was the intention, but there was a lot of reverse psychology. And I see this in South Africa as well, how association, like in terms of food, African foods, is not really on the day-to-day diet, because this is food we ate when we were poor. Definitely, I'm not going back to this. So our diet is more Eurocentric in its makeup, and our aspiration is aspiring to be very Eurocentric. So I think that we need to find ways, that reverse psychology. And I think people like Chef Mukhadi, Mpho, around their practices and the things that they're doing to influence sort of perspective. So if somebody goes into Mpho's practice and she then recommends sorghum, I suppose it's something that people could find it a bit shocking, because it's not what you would typically get a qualified dietitian to recommend. And chefs like Mukhadi as well, who would say, here's a product, this is how you can incorporate it in this particular recipe you're making at home. then already it's starting to shift the conversation, and it's playing around reverse psychology. So you don't just have policy saying, guys, we need to start growing sorghum, and then it ends there. But you're seeing a lot of aspirational, because I think, unfortunately, we have to admit is that people aspire to seem to be progressive. So if we play on that as a people, or the industry rather, we play on that, then you find that at least we try and increase demand to at least main market in South Africa, created as an aspirational brand, and not just a product that sits only for the high earners, but you get mainstream, that people actually have access to it. And then you find ways to then support your farmers. How do you increase your yields per your hectare? And you subsidize those so that they also encouraged to grow it. Because I think even as if I was a farmer commercially, I don't think I would farm anything that's not commercially viable. You're in business to be able to make a profit. And so, give me subsidies to encourage me to grow this. Encourage me, make my product, not have extra costs like your VAT, for example, but also create a market for me. And I think one of the key things, and in this session, we're privileged to have people from government. Government is one of the biggest buyers. So your correctional services, your Department of Education, your in health industry, those people through Treasury, they then put out tenders and people purchase. So if every hospital, every prison, every school, through your feeding scheme, you created a market. Even if you put sorghum in a soup and you give that to kids in schools as you're part of your feeding scheme, but you have to create a market for these commodities so that farmers at least encourage, as they start growing, that there's an opportunity for them to start growing this. So definitely there's a market for sorghum, but I think for me is let's make it accessible and let's really create food products and do reverse psychology so that people are encouraged to start consuming and aspire to be part of this revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Spa. I love the point about the reverse psychology. You're right, though, because driving influence is multi-pronged, and even to, and even when Prof. May spoke earlier around, even producing or looking at food alternatives, rice alternatives, etc., to be able to really widen the perspective of what's even possible when looking at sorghum. But the idea of also supporting, let's support, and I want to say incentivize, right, the production of this from your smallholder farmers all the way out to retailers, and also, of course, linking back to pricing. So those are all very great and interesting thoughts that you brought up for us and perspectives to think about. So I'm going to bring up next Letu from Ukamba Beerworks. We heard a little bit from her earlier around, the fermenting of, sorghum, for bread and others, but also it includes beer, beer production. And we wanted to hear a little bit about, from your perspective, Letu, when I was introducing you earlier, I spoke about, the partnership that you have to train students and innovating, in building curriculums in that sense, right? So clearly your purpose is not just about the consumption itself, but it's elevating the narrative, it's creating a product that speaks to African culture, understanding of a culture and its values, right? So we're talking legacy here as well. But just also share a little bit with us about that and what has been your experience as well from an access and supply perspective in terms of when you're producing your beers and products and acquiring the quantities that you want. Do you get them at the rate that you need them? Over to you, Letu.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invite into this panel. I've always taken interest in sorghum, firstly, from growing up. I grew up in Zimbabwe, in southern Zimbabwe, in a small district called Cholocho. And because the place is very drought-ridden, and the only crop that grows mostly there is sorghum. So we grew up eating sorghum. The most weird thing about it was the fact that every year, almost every term at school, we were taught, there was always a question about your staple food. And every time the question always came, and they asked you, what's your staple food? And the answer was always maize. So they drummed it into our heads that our staple food is maize, even if we stayed in a place where maize didn't really grow well. So it was always in our minds that sorghum is almost like something that you eat because of poverty or something. I remember 1991, 1992, I was young. There was the biggest famine in the country. And the only crop that almost was harvestable, like tiny bits, was sorghum. And our mothers, because we didn't have enough to grind and make meal, they would boil it. So we eat it like rice and mix it with nuts from amarula trees. And that's what we ate, and we survived the famine because of that. And looking at it now, I'm realizing that we were healthy. It's because we were eating good food, and we looked at it as poverty food at that time. I remember years later, I went to a restaurant in Joburg, and we paid some like 200 rand or more for a plate of uhayes, the same thing, the boiled sorghum, which I always looked at as my poverty food. So before I even go further into the brewing, I think we have to understand and shed a light on the education system. The education system is not teaching our kids about our indigenous food, our nutritious indigenous foods. We are told that almost everywhere we are told that we should eat maize, we should eat rice, all these other things that come from other countries, So when we started Ukamba Beer Works, we wanted to build a brewery that has something uniquely African. Beer, as you know, it's nowadays it has its roots in Europe, basically all beer styles, and we wanted to try and create something that will be unique, because we will not convince Germans, for instance, that we are better than them at making lagers. We can't convince the British that we can make ales better than them, because they've been doing that for years. So we're like, okay, now what can we use? There's sorghum, which they do not use in those countries. So let's try and use it in our beers. So our first beer, which we call Uchwala Sorghum Saison, we created it to basically capture the same essence of Mkombot, and but in a modern clear beer. And the market has actually responded very well to it, which is something that we're happy about, that we're quite right about that. When it comes to accessibility, it's a struggle. There's many other brewers who would like to brew with sorghum malt. There's a few places where you find it, but it's not easy to find it. I believe that if it was much more accessible, many brewers will be using it. There's many guys who have interest in it. So I think there's a broken link between the users and the farmers, or maybe the farmers also do not know exactly that it's being used in the craft beer scene in making modern beer. So those are the links that need to be established. I think it will make things much more easier, and it will also create more employment for the people in basically in the country and the farmers, and add more value to them. So yeah, there's also a brewer in Ghana who basically does full-time sorghum brewing all his beers. And we've been learning from them through this other company that sells yeasts and enzymes. So these guys that always come, exchange knowledges, and we keep on trying to find better ways of getting better extraction from sorghum every time. It's a very difficult grain to brew with, especially modern beer, because also our systems the brewing equipment is not designed for sorghum. It's designed for barley, which has more what you call this, husks. So I've been doing that. Sometimes I even use rice hulls to help with filtration. So we're still developing that and going ahead. And yes, last year I went to the InterVarsity brewing competitions, and I met some students from Limpopo, and we agreed that this year we want to take it up with them, and I basically want to join their brewing club so that we can invest more time and teach these kids how to use indigenous grains, not just sorghum, all the millets. I'm interested in millets as well, like finger millets as well, which I'm getting some of it from Zimbabwe. And I recently found out that there's some farmers who are growing it in Limpopo, somewhere in Polokwane or something. So that's basically where we're trying to go, yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And I think I love the, already that cross-country, honest education, collaboration, and, none of us holds the answer alone, right? But where can we learn from others? And I've heard other speakers as well speak to this stage in terms of, where can we collaborate, where can we do more, and what can we collectively drive, how can we collectively, drive the change that we want to see in this. I want to just pause there and just let our attendees know, I am aware that we are running about 15 minutes behind in our program. Please do bear with us. And we'll try and be swift as we move along. But I think I'm seeing in the chat a lot of conversation and responses, and I think the learning continues in the conversations that are happening in the chat box. So thank you so much, everyone, for also using that to your benefit as well. So I want to then bring up Spiwe as the last of the panel in terms of just sharing from your perspective at Marmalade Farm. So, reading up a little bit about, the vision, right, of taking African indigenous crops out of the periphery and into the mainstream. We heard from Mukhadi earlier, Spamandla and everyone, which also has its own challenges, acknowledging that. But I wanted to hear from you, what has been your experience in this sense, and, especially aligning demand and supply markets, for sorghum and sorghum-based products. But also conscientizing minds. And I'm asking this because I want to also just hear a little bit from your perspective in terms of, are you feeling a sense of pushback when it comes to this mainstreaming mission that you have in your role at Marmalade Farms? And what's been that experience? And I just ask that, 4 minutes maximum for that, kind of overview, which I know is not fair because you're the last one up, but unfortunately this is the limitations that we're facing now as previous. So I'll hand over to you to hear your thoughts.
Hi, thanks, Vuyo. My camera is not on. Please, can it be switched on?
Absolutely. Kanto will help you right now with that. And we can try and make sure we can see and hear you. There you go. It's coming on right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll try and do my best in the limited time that I have. I think I have not really been met with any pushback or resistance from people. Sorghum has been well received by the outlets and the households and individuals that we've actually tried to promote and sell to. In fact, sorghum is one of the few crops from African Marmalade that we're just not able to keep up with demand. We've been able, I think, to share the story, explain the nutritional benefit. Once you dial up the nutritional and health benefits, it just becomes easy. It's a no-brainer. People don't even have to be convinced. They just say, okay, fine, I need 2 kg, I need 4 kg, or I need 10. And then some parents, you find that they've got children at tertiary institutions. Then the kids are now eating it at home. But then when they say they go to varsity, they say, I need to send about 4 kg for my daughter. And I mean, the child could be at UCT, they could be at VET, could be at UP. And the challenge is obviously on the supply side. And we're sitting in here with the various types of sorghums that we have that we're growing. As you can see also here, we've got various types of sorghums as well as the millet. And the challenge I'm faced with as a farmer and somebody who's trying to aggregate is that a lot of the farmers do want to grow it, but we know that a lot of the smallholder farmers don't really have got the financial resources to grow up on scale. They can only do that if they actually have an offtake agreement. So somebody says, give me an offtake agreement, therefore I can then do 5-10 hectares. A lot of people have got the land, and then there is no offtake agreement because we cannot say for sure how many tons will be purchased by who at what price. So that becomes a problem. So I think we need to change the way we're farming. So if we could be able to encourage more people to join farming, but actually grow the right crops. There is no point in declaring having the UN having declared 2023 as the year of the millet, which includes sorghum, but we needed to understand that they are supposed to go into the 2022-2023 planting season. That has passed. So the time has passed. We have not much sorghum has been planted in this country to actually make sure that the chefs can actually put this on their plate. Now we need to actually stretch this thing to say it's going to go into the 2023-2024 planting season. But do we have enough planting material? Do we have enough seeds? Where are the farmers going to get the seeds from? In most cases, we have to bring the seeds from the various African countries because we just don't have enough. So whatever we would have grown as South African farmers, we end up having to sell for consumption, or we hold back because we want to make sure that we can actually grow enough. So that is some of the challenges that we have. So while the chefs can create the vibes, the farmers are actually going to make sure that they fill the plate because they can order a ton. If we don't have, there's nothing. So they'll say, and that's part of the problems we've had experience with the chefs that are saying, okay, I want to put this in the menu. Will you be able to provide me with 200 kilograms every month or for during winter, whatever period? And the answer is actually in most cases, no, unless you start to import it. When you import it, then you stop being competitive because then it becomes something, for the benefit of the affluent people and not the ordinary people, which is unfair because we need to make sure that there's food sovereignty. Indigenous African people need to have access to indigenous food. At this stage, you're only going to find it into all the specialty shops, fancy restaurants and everywhere else, but you're not just going to find it at your local retail outlet. You cannot walk in there and easily find sorghum crushed in various formats. For instance, you can do it coarse, which you're gonna be soaking and cooking into the soft porridge or your pap. You also need to turn it into millet as to be in the same level as your maize meal. You're not gonna have that. You also need to be able to mill it into a flour because we've seen a rise or a surge in demand for flour where people now wanna bake with it because it's gluten-free. But then there's just not enough because again, we don't even have the equipment to mill it into those various sizes. I mean, I was at Nampo recently and I said, can you get me a machine that can mill finger millet, pearl millet, and sorghum? And, they showed me one machine, it was making the stuff. Same thing with teff when we wanted to mill that stuff. It's just gonna be coarse, it's not gonna be as fine as we needed it to be. So those are actually the challenges that we are dealing with. And I think for us is that we also see government distributing seeds. When they distribute seeds, we have not seen government distributing sorghum seeds. People would get all sorts of other seeds. They'll get spinach and cabbage and whatever other stuff. And these are water guzzling crops. We are not getting the drought resistant crops that are being, so we need to get government to practice what they preach. So if it's sorghum, if 2023 is the year of the millet, which includes sorghum, can we see that in practice? We're sitting in here having to source from somewhere. There are opportunities, farmers do want to grow. One of the big things I want to address that I saw coming from the chat is that most of the farmers are saying, Spiwa, I want to grow sorghum, but what am I going to do with the beds? Some farmers have grown and I want to explain what's happening. So I asked people, I said, do we have more beds than we've had before? The answer is no. We don't have more beds right now in the world than we've had maybe 100 or 50 years ago. What has happened is that there is less food for the animals because people are growing stuff because of this monocropping. So there could be 10,000 vast tracts of land, but there is nothing that the birds are going to be able to eat. So as that one sole sorghum farmer, you've basically opened an open restaurant for the birds to come in and eat from there. That is why they're going to eat the bulk of your stuff. So you're standing, you're sticking out like a gum tree, among shrubs. And that is what's leading to the birds eating your sorghum. And there is no deterrent that you could actually have. So we need to think about how we're going to be able to get more, create a sorghum belt, but also plant indigenous trees that the birds can feed on, as well as planting things like sunflower and whatever else that the birds can actually eat on. And they will still eat a little bit of your sorghum, but they will leave some of it for you to be in a position to harvest. And then have the milling plants where we can actually take the stuff for grinding or for crushing. Because right now it's all being done almost kind of manually, which is time consuming, which actually adds into the price. And the thing is that people keep on saying they need to be, the following exotic, they need to be aspirational. But what can be more aspirational than taking care of your own health, other than eating indigenous? So if you are aspirational, if you are classy, you better go back to basics and actually eat indigenous crops, and which is going to be sorghum.
Thank you so much, Spiwa. What an inspiring way to kind of like, wrap up. And I think also the practicalities of, how to help build this sorghum belt, as you're calling it, and how our farmers can, think about, how to discourage birds from taking their seeds. I just want to keep you on this, Piwe, because I'm now wrapping up with our panel. I'm glad that everyone has been chatting in the chat box, and we will keep the conversation going after today. So we'll be in touch with all our attendees and how to take this forward. But Piwe, from you, I wanted to hear, as we close off, I'm giving you 30 seconds to just respond to this. Today's commentary, today's conversation will be drafted into a position paper that will be handed over to the Department of Agriculture, right, and contributing hopefully to the preparation for the UN Food System Summit that's taking place in July of this year. So, we want to also hear from our panelists, I'm giving you 30 seconds. If you could name, 1 or 2 priority areas that, you think need to be taken forward, need to be aware of in terms of what needs to be addressed and how it can be addressed, and your role in addressing this priority issues. 30 seconds, and then we can go.
Yes. One thing will be seeds. We need to have enough seeds that can actually be accessed by farmers. Without the seeds, there is nothing we can talk, there's nothing. The universities right now, a lot of them source the seeds from some of the farmers or actually have got to import. We've supplied some of the seeds. We just had a request from the University of the Northwest that is looking for sorghum seeds. There is just no seeds in the country that these institutions can actually do research. So seeds, it's a big focus.
Thank you so much, Piwe. I like the succinctness of it, and I appreciate that. Very clear, very specific in terms of what's needed and for support. I want to go all the way back to the start of our panel. Bring back Mpho, right? Mpho, from your experience, as a dietitian, what would you say are priority issues that you think need to be focused on as we are transforming, right, our food systems, as we're looking at growing awareness and use of sorghum for inclusion in the position paper?
Thank you. For me, it's education. I trained as a dietitian about 19 years ago. There was brown rice and salmon and everything that is Eurocentric, and you get sent into the rural areas where nobody knows what you're talking about or can't even afford it. And when I wrote the book and got into this work, I literally taught myself and sat down with older people to ask them. I think even now, the education system from primary school doesn't even look at indigenous foods. Look at the school feeding system. There is absolutely nothing that resembles an African, African foods. And then we wonder why children don't appreciate the foods and why when they grow up, they don't integrate the foods. I think the school nutrition program should be used as an education tool to actually help and also support the small scale farmers that are around the villages, because we can't keep on saying we need transformation in the food system and in the economic system, whereas government doesn't actually participate at all. So that's it for me.
And while I've got you still, the second part of my challenge to everyone was, what role, do you think you can contribute to this action? So
okay. I think with education, especially with seeing clients and doing talks like this, I think I see clients who says, are you serious? I can eat sorghum and still lose weight. And I say, do it. You're going to eat more and you're going to lose weight. I find that I get better transformation and better results with my clients when I bring them back to traditional foods, because I'm not asking them to forget who they are. I'm asking them to embrace and go back to those beautiful childhood memories. So that's my contribution.
I love that. I want to hear from Heidi as well on the same action points that we can take forward. Go ahead.
Yes, going forward, like Mpho said, education is key, but also chefs need to educate themselves around food systems, but all their role in the food system, because once you understand what your role is in the food system, you're not just there cooking food, you're there to champion also food systems and also healthy food systems, especially an indigenous one. So for us as chefs to learn where we fit into the food system and how we can actually empower ourselves with knowledge so that we're able to bridge that knowledge system with the consumers. So we basically carry the knowledge from farmers and bridge it to give it to consumers so that they can then access or know how to even use the crops. So how to use sorghum on their daily, and how to use the indigenous knowledge system to actually make themselves healthy. So for us chefs, we need to see and understand our role in the food system and where we can actually, do better and advocate for these healthy indigenous crops.
Thank you, Mohadi. So over to you, Skamandla.
Great, so thanks. I think for us, two things. One thing we've already done, we've co-authored a book called African Harvest Table with the Dr. Ethel Piri from Stellenbosch University. And part of this project, what we do through our nonprofit organization, we have distributing it to schools in over 9 provinces. So the coloring book and the coffee table book as part of donations. And we're running competitions currently nationwide. So children get to color in African crops. At the same time, we then get them to compete to see, if you do know this product, what do you use it in? And part of your prize is actually all these African superfoods, if I could use that word. So that's really what we're doing around education. So I think for us, one of the key things, and we've been chatting now to the Department of Agriculture to see how we can collaborate this initiative we're doing through our nonprofit with Department of Education, where we can actually drive more growth. The other key thing I think for us around demand, probably the second thing, is we will, as a food company, we will create food products, and that's a lot of products on the pipeline right now in terms of different categories, which are going to be using sorghum, just for you guys to just be on the lookout. And so that's what we're going to be doing to add value into the to the food industry. And I think for us, one of the key things is action. We want people to do, individuals, but also the public sector, drive demand. If you don't buy the products, if we don't consume these products on a day-to-day, if a week I don't get to eat sorghum or any African crop, then I'm just here talking. We have to ourselves drive the demand, but also government needs to, through their public procurement, be able to drive demand so that we can actually create a market for these products. Thank you.
Thank you. Drive demand and educate. And last but not least, certainly, Letu, back to you. You've got 30 seconds, action point and your role in it on how we can drive this agenda forward.
I will echo the previous speakers. I think education, and we need to educate our kids from an early age. For us at Ukamba, we will continue experimenting with sorghum. We'll continue educating and sharing our ideas, whatever learned with everyone else. We're hoping to create a South Africa or an Africa that creates its own unique products that we cannot compete with people from foreign countries. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's so perfect. Driving also competitive edge, right, for us as a continent, ultimately. So having said all of that, unfortunately, I mentioned our time constraints earlier and the fact that our chat box continues to be there. If you've got comments, questions, unfortunately, we won't have time to go through the questions, but I have been seeing the engagement that's been very exciting that's been happening there. That also will form part of our report as well, that we'll take forward. So with that, I want to thank our great panel. You always wish you had more time, but this is the first of many. I also said that earlier. And I want to then move to our closing remarks for today. In these last few minutes, I want to bring back Dr. Moeng from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development to just really, Dr. Moeng, 2 minutes to just kind of like wrap up from your perspective what you gleaned from the conversation today. I will unfortunately have to be very strict on the timing with all of our closing remarks speakers today. So Dr. Moeng, I want to bring you up and then 2 minutes to just share your closing thoughts with us. Dr. Moeng, you are on mute. There we go. Yes. I've got you on camera, but unfortunately still on mute.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much to the panelists who have raised these issues from a different and diverse perspective. From the diet issue, wherein our daily intake aspects are critical, from your cooking area, from the aspect of learning, building these matters into a learning environment, and most of all, bringing the aspect of the seed itself, wherein we are all aware that there is a huge decline in the production of this indigenous crop. I like the way, I can't remember now her name. I wrote her name somewhere. It's not Pamandla Banyele, it's Mpo. Is it Mpo? Yes, who is no, I think it's Amanda, who refers to it, food, Africa's superfoods, because that's how we must sell these indigenous crops. And again, we are aware that, my apologies, we are aware that farmers prefer high yielding crops that are more profitable.
I think we're having some connectivity issues with Dr. Moeng. Am I correct? Yes, yes. So I think in the interest of time, what I'm unfortunately have to do, Dr. Moeng, my apologies. I need to perhaps. Okay, so I need to. Are you there, Dr. Moeng?
Yes, I'm here. You're no longer hear me?
No, unfortunately, the connection keeps cutting. For us, and yeah, so unfortunately, I do have to perhaps look at handing the mic over to Dr. Chilidzi from FENAPAN to share his closing remarks. Dr. Chilidzi, I've also given you 1 minute to wrap up. It feels a little bit like the Olympics, doesn't it, everyone, in terms of how quickly can we do our closing remarks? But I hope you are there, Chilidzi.
Yeah, thank you so much, Program Director. I will be very brief. For me, the excitement is that we had a rich dialogue today in terms of assisting the profiling of sorghum as a superfood. The engagement in terms of my observation, we had different sectors in terms of making sure that we are stimulating the dialogue between government and private sector to start to collaborate on this issue. The other element that I've observed is that we have included different disciplines, different value chain actors. There was a gender mix and also generational mix. For me, this is the platform which we convened, which we are proud of, to make sure that we start to dialogue on these issues. The multi-stakeholder approach that we were aiming at here is that we are about to co-create transformative solutions and actions. And for us, we cannot do it alone, but we do it with us then benefiting from other voices, other experiences that are out there. And for us, we really appreciate. The last thing to note is that we have peaked at 85 participants, and then we are strongly finishing at 80 participants. And for this, we appreciate. In terms of the calendar events which are coming, I will mention 3, which I think we need to profile sorghum in a very joint manner. The first one is the International Women's Day, which is going to be happening 8th of March. The second event is the World Food Day, which is going to happen October 16. And the 14th Africa Day for Food and Nutrition Security 2023, which is coordinated by the AU. So if we leverage these platforms to profile this crop, I think as a collective, we're going to get some mileage. So I will now leave it to Jeanette then to come with the tangibles in terms of after producing the paper, then what next?
In the interest of time, I will just jump in now. Thank you everyone for this, what I think is a very constructive and dynamic session. I won't try to summarize what took place, but in line with the theme of the session, I think what is quite obvious and we are all in agreement with is that there is a need to increase investment support to increase the marketing of sorghum, simply because I think from the get-go it was established that sorghum is very much relevant to the food system transformation agenda of South Africa. Professor May indicated up front that there is a market for it. It checked all the boxes in terms of the nutritional benefit, in terms of the impact on the environment. And we know already from all of the speakers, particularly the panelists, that shared from the cultural aspect of it. Of course, in terms of the marketing, we have on both sides. Market is all about demand and supply. And in terms of increasing the market options, because someone correctly pointed out, the farmers are going to only invest in cultivating this crop if they can have access to market. And if there is no production, as Sifwe said, then we cannot have the consumption. But if there is no consumption, the farmers are not going to invest in. So what it highlights is that along the food chain, we all have to come together to work as a unit. And how do we address? So we look at all of the different activities in terms of improvement in education, including in the educational curriculum, not just for the students, but also for the chefs. From the farmer's perspective, how do you access the seeds so that you can cultivate in the correct time and the quality seeds, etc. I was very happy that Sifwe mentioned that while acknowledging or allocating the year 2023 as the year of the millet, it's a very good start, because we've seen, for instance, as in quinoa, as someone pointed out, that this had an impact, but this is a long term. And so at the end of 2023, we cannot sit on our laurels and think we have done our job. So in terms of marketing, it is no surprise that one of the key recommendations from the 2021 study, which is the key reference point for this session, was to improve communication, improve awareness, increase marketing. And in this context, one of the role of AgriLux marketing is to do exactly this. And this is the reason we are having this session. And it is actually a precursor to the launch of a marketing platform, which we will be doing in collaboration with quite a number of the panelists who are at the table, including Letu, who will be hosting the event, the launch of this event on Saturday at his company on the VA waterfront. And this is the Wild Feast launch. As you may be aware by now from all of the data we have shared with you, WILD stands for Wholesome, Indigenous, Local, and Diverse. And we want to use this platform as an ongoing platform to bring together the stakeholders from the entire food chain, both the public and private sector, that we can work in cohesion to come up with ways to increase awareness and the demand for this crop. Just on a final note, in preparation for this event on Saturday, one of the team members who've been trying to reach out to patrons to attend the event, and the way it was written up in terms that it's going to be a fine dining event, one person said, oh, we are very interested in this, but I'm shocked because I do not think sorghum can be associated with fine dining. And it goes to speak, a number of the speakers indicated that how we view sorghum, the attitude, and this was not necessarily said in, to be negative, but without us recognizing it, we take on these attitudes. A lot of us associate sorghum with poverty. And if we're trying to be aspirational, you want to stay away from it. But as Sifwe correctly said, there couldn't be anything more aspirational than your health. And we see very well that sorghum ticks all the boxes in terms of not just your physical health, but of the environmental health as well. And on that note, I'm glad that Chilisi at the beginning thanked everyone, because I would have to say all protocols observed. I am seeing the chair nodding her head. And so I really want, of course, we will be in contact with you and we will further thank you. But for now, just want to thank everyone, all of the speakers, including those for which this has been quite an effort to participate. And also, as importantly, all of the participants, those of you who have stayed on to the very end, we really thank you, and we hope that you will continue to engage with us as we join forces to be able to address and continue to expand the markets for sorghum, not just for the farmers, but for each one of us, for our health and well-being. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you so much. And I think that was the perfect ending to what I think was an amazing session for everyone. We know that we've kept you here longer than anticipated. I myself personally want to thank all our speakers today. I find myself more enriched and understanding of, what not only the key areas are of, challenges and possible achievements, but how we can take the conversation forward. I look forward to connecting with you all. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you to the team behind the scenes. Thank you to all our attendees and our speakers. Have a great day. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.